One of the biggest challenges as our population gets older and the increasing number of people are older, along with good health and living longer, is the challenge of people who are older and no longer able to care for themselves, both in terms of financial matters and emotionally and such. And inevitably, it ends up with different legal issues that often find their way into the court system. And the goal is to avoid that. So I was really excited to get a chance to meet with Martha Jo Patterson, who's an attorney here in Southern California, who, when I asked her the question more as a matter of just trying to identify her area of specialty, was very careful to say she was trying to stay out of conservatorship court. Martha Jo, thank you so much for time today. I really appreciate getting a chance to chat with you.
Great chatting with you too.
So first off, just for people who are listening, describe basically what is a conservatorship, and more importantly, why would you want to avoid that from a legal point of view if you can?
Okay, so a conservatorship is a legal process where you are deemed by the court to be no longer capable of handling your legal affairs. And so you lose the right to sign a contract, the right to decide your own health care, the right to make your own decisions because you've been deemed incapable. So other states call it guardianship, and that might make it easier for people to understand. I don't know where the term conservatorship or how we end up calling them that in California, but it's that proceeding where you as the person lose all your rights. So, and it's a very invasive court proceeding. So once the court says you can't take over, then the court makes whoever is in charge account for all of your money, and you lose all of your legal rights.
And so when people say that it's hard to get a conservatorship, I often feel like saying, as it should be, because you're talking about taking really, not all of your rights, but a lot of your rights, certainly your right to make decisions on your own affairs.
Yeah, well, it actually could be, it can go so far as take away all your rights, including your right to vote. So you can actually lose all of your civil rights. You can be placed in memory care units, which most people don't realize that they are secured perimeter, and you can lose the right to leave, which is like a mental health hold. So you've literally been, forced into confinement. So it is very invasive. And yes, it is hard. I know how difficult it can be because I've had to help families when it's not clear whether somebody does or doesn't have mental capacity. And because once you turn 18, you're presumed to be an adult, you're presumed to be able to make contracts, and that may not be true. So if you're a developmentally disabled adult, you may be still functioning like a 3-year-old, and nobody would think that you have that ability. On your 18th birthday, you're deemed to be able to make a contract. And certainly taking away that adult with the 3-year-old mentality's ability isn't something that we question a lot. But when you've been acting on your own, and I pick on my mother-in-law a lot because that way I don't have to pick on other people's families. We had to take her to conservatorship court because she had lost her ability. She did not know it. And their trust failed because when my father-in-law is hospitalized with hip surgery, and post-surgery, he could barely talk. It's a weird side effect of the anesthesia. He resigned, but she wouldn't resign because she knew she was fine. And we had to take her to court because she couldn't remember he was in the hospital, but she's in charge of paying the bills. And, that is difficult, but we had to force her to have a doctor evaluate her capacity because she wouldn't go to a doctor because the last doctor she saw 3 years before said she had Alzheimer's and took away her driver's license. And it's difficult, but often people are falling for every scam in the book, and yet we can't prove that they're incompetent because it's not a black or white thing. And those are my hardest cases, the saddest one, where families are really trying desperately to keep the scammer away from their loved one who is, sending sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to some scammer who is just bleeding them dry.
Yeah.
Yet we can't prove they have capacity. But unfortunately, we have to have that. And I get the stories of all the corruption in our courts of the private fiduciaries who are stealing, the families who, one kid the good kid thinks that the bad kid has taken over and now they're stealing. And it's, it is it's just not a pretty place to be. Unfortunately, it's our only option, because we have to have somebody who can take over. And the courts, they try hard, but they often fall into, I think that they've fallen into the corruption of private professional fiduciaries personally. I think they think they're good people when they're not always good people.
It's so difficult because these are very difficult jobs. And I think the thing that, determining if somebody has capacity or not is emotionally very difficult, right? To admit the mom doesn't have capacity. It's much easier to say, oh, she knows what she's doing, than it is to admit if she doesn't, unless you're involved financially, in which case you want her to be incapacitated, so you're in charge of the money. And same with fiduciaries. I've done a couple in probate where I do more simple probate administration fiduciaries. I would never do one with elder care or litigation like this. But it's hard work, the paperwork and the process and getting things right and resubmitting and refiling. And I think it's always easy to look at the other guy as the bad guy because something is difficult or expensive, yet these things are difficult, these things are expensive. So how do you find your way between the lines to keep yourself and also not be over judgmental of other people, but then when you see people cross those lines, to jump on them? How do you keep yourself between those lines?
Well, what I try and do is to try and keep people out of court. What I try and do is start with, if we can talk and and somebody still has some ability to reason and think, is if somebody's trying to pay their parents' bills, we first try and see what's going on. And if everybody puts the records out on the table, often the issues can be easily resolved. Somebody's living in the home, they're using mom and dad's checkbook for everything, and they're not paying their way. And we can turn it around very quickly by saying, okay, we're gonna stop this today. We're gonna separate accounts. We have to treat you guys like your roommates, and everybody is gonna pay their fair share. And now that caregiver child who's been working for free is going to get paid to work for mom and dad. So we have a clear line. We can't treat them differently, because if they're working for free, then maybe you're getting really cheap service if all they're doing is, sharing groceries with mom and dad, and maybe taking mom and dad's car and because they don't have one anymore, and taking it and filling it up with gas. That may be really cheap. And sometimes when people realize that what they're getting, they go, oh, I never thought of it that way. Sometimes it's reoriented. Now, if that isn't going to stop and we can't turn it around, then unfortunately, sometimes we have no choice but to stop the bleeding, as I call it, the financial bleeding, but to force somebody to go to court. Hate that answer because I'm going to get a lot of money, which I like, but the money is all going to come out of the elder person's pocket. And I really think that the system should be changed. If I were going to make two changes, one is I would set up some kind of a office where the person who is in charge was paid to do the job, and they were just paid a salary for doing jobs, so they couldn't profit from being the person who paid the bills and took care of the finances.
Right.
Two, that the attorney's fees and everything for, isn't paid out of, for these family fights, comes out of somebody else's pocket. It doesn't come out of the elder's pocket for the fact that they were being ripped off by their seniors, because it seems so unfair that, I can pick on my mother-in-law, which nobody paid for my services, so they didn't do that. But if you look at Britney Spears, the rumor is her court-appointed attorney was getting $520,000 a year to represent her. That's a lot of money, $10,000 a month. And then her father got paid to manage her money. Her mother got paid. I mean, everybody is getting paid out of her money while she's performing in Vegas and somehow allegedly incapacitated. I do not believe that conservatorship, and I will say it out loud. I do not know how in the hell they got it, because there was no way on earth that there was any validity to that granting of that conservatorship, in my opinion. And there was some fraud or corruption that occurred in that case. And I don't know who or where, so I'm not going to name names, but There's been lots of documentaries, and because to get that kind of conservatorship, she would have had to have dementia, and she did not have dementia. And
Yeah.
a mental illness conservatorship lasts a year, and then you're done. And that was not what was done, and that's what should have maybe perhaps been done. I don't know if that even was valid. I read her biography, but I don't know. I don't know what the truth is. But certainly, a 13-year conservatorship was never warranted by any stretch of the imagination.
And I'm not a Britney Spears fan, but to me, it just seems so hard to imagine that she could both perform at the level she does, because and I'm no fan of hers, I'm no fan of her music, no fan of her
Neither.
shows. Not that I'm against it. I'm just saying, it's just not my thing. But you can't do a Vegas performance at that level without learning your scripts and your lines and your moves and having input on, I'm sure, costumes. I mean, again, it's not my style, but people are paying for that, not because she's crazy, but because they appreciate what she's doing. And the thing I always tell people also is, it should be a high bar to take somebody's rights away. It should not be frivolous.
And because of the humiliation, we did not lightly take away my mother-in-law's rights. I did not lightly go to court to remove her as taking care of her own money. And we did have to place her in the memory care unit because she kept wandering out at 11, 12 at night. Fortunately, her neighbors were nice and kind and took care of her, and she had no danger. But she was in danger every time she wandered out looking for her husband in the middle of the night, of getting lost, of wandering away and not finding a nice person. And we had to lock her up. I did not take that lightly. I was given a lot of grace by the judge, who kind of took my word for it, because he realized that we weren't taking it lightly. And I was glad that I had to meet that high bar. But I'm also trying to get people, before we get to the point with my mother and father-in-law,
Right.
to come in and update their documents, so we don't have that happen to others, to keep them out of the court if we possibly can, because once the court gets involved, even then, and we didn't have any, issues, and we were in a smaller county, so we didn't have to pay a court-appointed attorney like in Los Angeles you do, and Orange County you also do, unless you qualify for the public defender, which means you have no money typically. So, and the court-appointed attorneys, they do a hard job, but they're going to get paid, and we should have to meet that bar. It's a difficult bar, but I don't think that people realize that there's a living hell of conservatorship court, and that they can avoid it. And there's a myth out there. Well, my loved one just got diagnosed with dementia, they can't sign a document. Well, that keeps good people from updating their legal documents, but the bad guy, Mr. and Miss Scam Likely, they know better. They know that you can continue signing documents no matter if 100 doctors say you have capacity, because of that presumption in the probate court, the probate code, that says you're presumed. They'll say, well, when you sign that contract giving me $100,000 to go to the Prince of Nigeria, because we all know that was a scam, you knew what you were doing. Well, unfortunately, it's hard to overcome their fake, phony claims, because they will have a recording of you sounding quite normal.
Right.
People don't realize how normal somebody sounds when they have dementia, but they can't recognize their children, but they can, on the phone, they can give away their name, address, and social security number very competently.
Well, also they go in and out. I went through this with family members, where there are times that they seem normal, we would say, well, how come he's not like that all the time? And the scam artist at that time is to get them to make recordings, make videos, take pictures, sign documents. And if somebody's lucid for 3 or 4 hours a day, most commonly during the daylight hours, at nighttime is when they're more susceptible to pressure. And so these are very complicated issues that I think, there's pluses and minuses, and there's, like you say, it's hard to define. There's no black or white. And I think also there's no standard that people, enter into a standard and stay there. The process moves. You did mention the importance of getting documents done, which you can only do what you can do, But one thing you can do is do your best to plan ahead with proper estate planning documents and securing them appropriately. I know another one that I would say to people is, try to get the elders moved into facilities that are safe for them for the next 10, 15 years. It's very hard to move people. And we're very lucky. We got my mother and father-in-law into Leisure World, and they're just set up differently. They have wider everything. They have everything is handicap accessible. They have security. They have check-in provisions. When they were living in Florida in a nice facility, my wife was up all kinds of hours worrying about her mother falling. So I do think that if you can get them moved into a proper location that's going to work for a long time, that's a help. What else do you see as good preventative measures? Is there anything particular in the documents, or is there something else that you think people need to prepare?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm recommending, I was glad I did it for myself. It was, at first, I made it easier for people to become the successor trustee. And then my mother had this, I don't think she intended it to be a brilliant idea, but it ended up being a brilliant idea that I'm now passing on to anybody and everybody. So my mom was widowed when I was 16 and she was 49. And so she became a very strong, independent woman. And she saved like nobody I've ever met. And so she had put money aside for both my kids. My daughter didn't like school, so my daughter started working at 16, and my mom matched her money in an IRA and put aside money in a 529 for my son. Now, my son is brilliant, and second year of college, he called me and he said, Mom, that 529 fund Nana set aside? So 529 fund is a fund you can set aside with and save taxes for your kids or grandkids for college. Yes. Well, I was reading, I know he's not normal, that she's going to get taxed if she doesn't use it. I'm already my second year. We should, make sure she starts using it so she doesn't get taxed, because I've only got 3 more years of college. So he came down. We spent a whole day. We got it. We're very grateful. He ended up graduating debt-free, thanks in large part to all the money she'd set aside for him.
Nice.
And we got that. So at the end of the day, she asked me this question, Martha, could he be my junior trustee? In my head, I said, there's no such thing as a junior trustee. But in my, as I thought, there's no such thing. But then I said, yes, Mom, he can be. Now, he was the ripe old age of 20, but he's very smart and he's an engineer. So he's really good at obeying rules and keeping records. And I knew that. And so he became, quote, a junior trustee so she could teach him how she saved and managed money. Now, legally, he was equal to her, but practically, he learned from her. She taught him how she saved and managed the money.
Wow.
He was on all of her bank accounts as legally her co-trustee, but practically that junior trustee. When she had a stroke 4 months before she died, and whether or not she was competent or not, I don't know, but she lost her beautiful handwriting. Very sad. She was writing her checks and saying, Martha, would you take them to the post office? And I couldn't read it. And the doctor had told me that the stroke had caused this problem. And I said, sure, Mom. I would rewrite them, literally put them in envelopes with stamps, mail them to him so he could put them in the bank. But that junior trustee and that concept, having that person alongside you, we didn't have to prove she was incapacitated. He already knew where her bank accounts were. He already knew how she liked managing her money. To save the day, he's my co-trustee or my junior trustee. He doesn't do anything day to day on my bank accounts, but if I went into the hospital and couldn't sign my name, he's already on them and he can. This quote idea of my mom, this junior trustee, which a lot of times when I propose it to somebody who has dementia, they're much more willing to accept their child as a junior trustee than an equal co-trustee. Mm-hmm. So kind of that languaging helps me convince them to accept help because they're still in charge. So that languaging helps. But having those co-trustees is quite brilliant. And I'm passing that co-trustee. So if you have that diagnosis, and having spouses add on the child. I had my son added on with my husband and I didn't die first. I didn't end up in the hospital, but every day as I drove to his care facility, I didn't worry if I was in an accident or if I died first, who was going to take care of Dad? My son was in charge. He wasn't going to have to wait for a death certificate. He wasn't going to have to prove that my husband couldn't serve. he was already there. We didn't have to do anything as my husband slowly d- fell into dementia land. I don't know what to call it, as he got worse and worse. I didn't ever have to even, I never had to worry. It was already taken care of. So
Right.
I'm on a personal crusade to make sure that as many people do this, and as many attorneys and people have my mom's great idea of the junior trustee. And if you wonder why him and not me, he looks like my dad. And I was always her little girl who lost her dad, even to the day she
Wow.
would send me to all of her friends and family, and I could be their attorney, but I could never quite be her attorney. So, what can I say?
So I was curious, what, just in wrapping up, your law firm is it Geisler Patterson Law?
Yeah, it's Geisler Patterson Law, and the Geisler was my main name is Geisler. My dad was city attorney of Anaheim when he died a million years ago in 1973. So his name's on the Stadium and Convention Center because he brought them to Anaheim with the help of
Wow.
Keith Murdoch and Jack Dutton and a few other luminaries of the past of Anaheim. And yeah, so yeah, that's my law firm, and it's only really me, but
the website is Elder Law Mom. Is that Elder Law Mom as in your mom, or is it Elder Law Mom as in a remembrance or appreciation of the contribution of your mom? It sounds to me like it's double entendre, but your mom really is the one, I think, with the concept. It's really so powerful.
it is. And and basically I'm an elder law attorney. My mom is my hero, will always be my hero, and I'm a mom, and it just kind of was easy to remember. And Geisler is hard to spell, and
Yes.
people spell it wrong. And my name is Martha Doe, and people like to change it. So it just was cute, and I like it because it does remember. And sadly, 2 out of 3 people with dementia are women, according to the Alzheimer's Association. Which is
Well, that's because you guys outlive us. It's unfortunate, but it beats the alternative.
It's partly because we outlive us, but now they're seen as men are living longer because they're not getting killed in war and other ways that men got killed in the past. It may also be because of our hormonal levels as well. I mean, women still are outpacing men when it comes to Alzheimer's slightly, but not the statistic that they're still giving is 2 out of 3 of women with Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is one form of dementia, but they kind of put it all under that umbrella for the Alzheimer's Association.
My wife would assume it's because men drive their wives crazy. So dementia is just one form of that, maybe.
I don't know all the reasons, but
Well, Martha Joe, the Elder Law Mom, whether it be a shout out to your mom for her contribution of the junior trust, which is really an interesting concept. I like the way you explained that.
I think it is a shout out to my mom. I mean, like I said, I would not be where I am today without her. I mean, to have done all that she did, going back to work, supporting me, putting me through college and law school, and my son, helping him through school, and surviving. My brother, my dad, and my grandmother all died the same year in that order. Surviving that without and with all the grace and dignity that she did. It is a big shout out to my mom. Like I said, she will always be my hero. I mean, I feel like I followed a little bit my dad's steps because I'm a lot like him to become a lawyer. I just wish I had known him more.
Well, we're going to go ahead and put all the contact information in the description below. If you're watching this on video, would be YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. Martha Joe Patterson, Geisler Patterson Law. She's the Elder Law Mom, elderlawmom.com. And then her phone number is on the website. Martha Joe, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your contributions. I appreciate learning from you today about these concepts.
Thanks. All right. Anytime.
And oops.